All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a profoundly important topic, breaking free from parental psychological control and, well, finally reclaiming your true, authentic autonomy. Now, if you've ever felt this strange sense of emptiness, or maybe a massive disconnect between what you're doing and what you actually desire, let me just say, you are not alone, and more importantly, it is absolutely not your fault. We're going to rely on some truly fascinating psychological insights today to explore how certain parental dynamics can quietly rewrite our internal reality. Plus, we'll cover exactly what we can do to take our minds back. Let's dive in.
So, here is the roadmap for this explainer. First, the true nature of a split mind. Second, why parents invade your mind. Third, their hypnotic control tactics. Fourth, why independence is denied. And finally, how to reclaim yourself.
Think about your childhood for a quick second. Did you constantly find yourself prioritizing your parents' feelings over your own? Like, did you spend your early years just ignoring your own desires just to keep the peace and do what they wanted? For a lot of people, this isn't just some fleeting childhood memory. It's a deeply ingrained survival habit. And it carries right over into adulthood, often leaving you entirely disconnected from your own feelings.
Section 1. The true nature of a split mind.
We really need to validate that exhausting gap between what you genuinely want and what you actually find yourself doing.
This creates a state known as splitting. Basically, when you constantly force yourself to do things you hate while ignoring your true feelings, your mind and body kind of just drift apart. Over time, as you repeatedly suppress your authentic voice, you literally lose touch with what you want. You might feel this heavy sense of lethargy, a deep emptiness, or a total lack of motivation. And the source material emphasizes something absolutely crucial here. This is not laziness, all right? And it is definitely not a sign of mental weakness. It is a frozen survival state. Your mind essentially just shuts down its normal functions to protect you from the ongoing stress of an environment where you simply aren't allowed to be yourself.
Moving on to Section 2, why parents take up residence in your mind. Let's step back and look completely objectively at the parent's psychological state to see where this all comes from. The root cause often starts right here. Controlling parents are frequently individuals who just failed to achieve their own independence. Whether it was due to family circumstances, the societal constraints of their era, or maybe just putting their own desires on the back burner for way too long, they end up with this profound sense of inner emptiness. Their sense of self becomes terribly thin, and because sitting with that emptiness is incredibly painful, they desperately seek a way to fill the void. And to fill that void, they resort to something pretty chilling, as our source material puts it. And this is a brilliant way to phrase it. The person who controls doesn't try to break the other person, but tries to take up residence inside their mind. Because a child is in a vulnerable position and obviously can't easily fight back, the parent just uses them as a vessel. They try to live inside the child's mind, controlling their thoughts and emotions, essentially using the kid to relive their own unfulfilled lives. It often masquerades as love or care, but honestly, it is effectively an invasion of your psychological space. Section 3, hypnotic control tactics. Let's look at the actual words they use to maintain this invisible control. See, they rebrand their control using seemingly gentle words. A classic tactic is sighing and saying something like, "Oh, you are such a good kid." But if we translate that, actually, scratch that, if we decode that, it really means, "You obeyed me without complaining." By constantly equating compliance with goodness, the child learns that holding back their true feelings is literally the only way to be valued. In an environment like that, the very ability to speak one's mind just never gets the chance to grow. But man, it goes even further. When a child eventually tries to bring up past hurts, they're often hit with straight-up gaslighting. You're remembering it wrong. You just imagined it. These aren't just innocent little disagreements about the past. These are weapons. They're used to deny the child's trauma and completely overwrite their actual reality. If a child hears this enough, they just stop trusting their own memory and intuition. They begin to evaluate every single situation with a default assumption that their own feelings must be incorrect. Section 4, why independence is denied. What happens when a child naturally starts to distance themselves and actually develop their own opinions? Well, when a child starts forming their own opinions and trying to create some distance, it's a completely natural sign of human development, right? But to a parent who relies on that child to fill their own inner void, this growth is a massive threat. Because they can't control the child effortlessly anymore, they panic. To justify their continued dominance and quiet their own anxiety, they'll unjustly label the child's natural independence as a problem.
They'll call the child crazy, say there's something wrong with them, or basically treat their completely normal desire for space as some sort of illness.
We absolutely need to reframe this toxic narrative right now. Setting boundaries is not a disease. It is a natural sign of growth. Period. Once a controlling parent slaps a label like crazy onto a child, it basically gives them a free pass to dismiss anything the kid says. But if we step back and just look at the facts, the one raising their voice, seeking space, and asking for respect is usually the one making the most logical sense. The child's demands are entirely reasonable. It's the parent's structure of control that is fundamentally flawed.
Section 5. How to reclaim yourself. So, how do we shift from understanding this theory to actually putting it into practice? I want to walk you through a really concrete process outlined in our source material. Because the control is so often hidden in everyday words, step 1 is to literally write down the conversations you have with your parents. Transcribe them. Step 2 is to look at those written words objectively to uncover the patterns. When you see it right there on paper, it's so much harder to be swept away by guilt or raw emotion. You might suddenly notice how they use phrases like "I paid for your food and shelter" to completely mask emotional neglect. You learn to rely on the cold, hard facts of the words rather than the manipulated emotions of the moment. And that directly leads us to step 3.
Step 3 requires you to draw a hard, definitive line. On one side is the parent's empty identity and failed independence. That is their burden. On the other side is your own life and your boundaries, and that is your responsibility. The reason your parents push you into a corner isn't because there is something wrong with you. It's because they failed to achieve their own independence. You simply cannot shoulder their psychological deficit for them. It's literally impossible.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Their emptiness is their burden, not yours. If you've lived with a split mind, unsure of what you truly want, remember that this was just a brilliant, incredibly necessary survival mechanism you developed in an impossible environment. It was never a weakness. Now that you can see the structure of their control, now that you can see exactly how they try to take up residence in your mind, you have the power to slowly evict them. By writing down the facts, trusting your own memories, and drawing that hard boundary, you can begin the patient, vital work of reclaiming your reality. So ask yourself, what is one boundary you can assert today to start taking your mind back?